Let's talk about something that's becoming increasingly important for enterprise companies worldwide: cyber risk management. Traditionally, cyber risk has been managed manually in silos, separate from the business's core operations. The future is about getting real-time risk insights benchmarked against your industry peers through automation. And CyberSaint's CyberStrong platform is leading the charge. CyberStrong is not just another point solution. It's a revolutionary platform. It's a quantified top-down risk approach where your unique cyber risks inform C-suite decision-making to identify your top 5 cyber risks and the controls to mitigate them. Sign up for your free cyber risk analysis by visiting securityweekly.com/cybersync. If your organization is ready to enhance cyber resilience, we have important insights for you. The Level Blue Futures Report 2024 sheds light on how rapid computing changes affect IT visibility. Our research reveals that while IT leaders see positive outcomes, 85% acknowledge increased risk. In this report, we identify the barriers to cyber resilience, the challenges impacting cybersecurity, and the business context that reveal operational issues. You'll also discover what's on the horizon and 5 essential steps for prioritizing cyber resilience. Get your complimentary copy of this crucial research today by visiting securityweekly.com/level blue. Cybersecurity, simplified. Do your end users always, and I mean always without exception, work on company-owned devices and IT-approved apps? I didn't think so. So my next question is, how do you keep your company's data safe when it's sitting on all those unmanaged apps and devices? 1Password has an answer to this question: Extended Access Management. 1Password Extended Access Management helps you secure every sign-in for every app on every device because it solves the problems traditional IAM and MDM can't touch. Check it out at securityweekly.com/1Password. That's the number 1Password.
Welcome back to Business Security Weekly. To ensure that you don't lose access to the Security Weekly content you know and love, please make sure that you subscribe to your favorite podcast feeds on alternative platforms such as Spotify, YouTube Music, Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Overcast, Podcast Addict, Pocket Casts, or anywhere else you listen to podcasts. Visit securityweekly.com/subscribe to find the buttons to subscribe to each show now. All right. And now for this week's leadership and communications articles. You can check out securityweekly.com/BSW362 if you want to follow along as we go through the news, or just to click those links and read the full articles. All right. So kicking off here, CEOs, is your business strategy bold enough? I think this is a really interesting one. And we've been living through an inflection point, particularly with like the Ubers and the WeWorks and, a lot of these tech-enabled startups disrupting other organizations where, it seems like almost everybody needs to constantly be asking themselves, am I going to get disrupted? Am I going to be the next Blockbuster or Borders Books or what have you?
Yeah,
And how often do I have to disrupt myself to not go out of business?
Right. And there's a ton of pressures. We talked about it in the last segment, right? I mean, everything from needing to drive revenue, being cost competitive, making sure that their portfolios, are attractive to clients, and now throw on all of the additional pressures of, the cybersecurity challenges, the regulatory challenges, all these new rapidly evolving technologies that they need to implement to stay competitive. There's a lot of pressures out there, not just on the CISO, but on the CEOs as well. And some of that's driving some of the angst when it comes to CISOs, right? Because CEOs are run, let's go, right? And the CISOs are trying to look at risk and trying to keep in step with them, moving so fast.
Right. The CISOs are trying to move and change to survive, and the CISOs are, trying to prevent them from doing that for the same reason, or they think for the same reason, right?
Right. Or at least take a little bit of a pause to make sure we can address risk.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's so much easier to do that on the front side, right? Like we talk about that all the time, like the whole shift left concept, which I think has been seriously overdone. But the end goal is like, look, if you take this into consideration, it's less of a go slow to go fast, right? It's less of a pause or a stop, jarring to the company as to say, all right, let's do this right from the start and get the alignment that we need, which frustratingly doesn't happen that often.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in the military, a lot would say slow is fast, fast is smooth, right? And
Yep.
we want to make sure that we're doing the right thing, so that way we don't have to go back and reinvent it later, redo it later. That bad busy, right? And in our world, that's a lot of business risk. So being able to have that conversation around slow is fast, fast is smooth, I think is worthwhile. But again, a lot of pressures from the CEOs to go, 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 run, run, run.
Yeah, I mean, the stat that kind of threw me for a little bit in this was 45% of CEOs surveyed say they don't believe their companies would survive more than a decade if they remain on the current path. Like,
Yeah,
that's a lot of change, right? Like, if you
right.
think about that, almost half of CEOs out there are either contemplating the potential or in process of articulating massive change for their
Hmm.
organizations.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, look at Netflix now. Has so much competition. Back when just not even 10 years ago, that was the go-to place if you wanted to stream a movie or something like that. And a lot of the companies that they got those licensing rights from now have their own streaming services. So
Yeah,
it's really changed the field, and they've had to create their own content, and like they have mobile games are included with your subscription. I've yet to meet a single person that
Right.
takes advantage of that.
yeah,
And
but even think about from the start, right? They started shipping with DVDs, right?
Hmm.
The name was Netflix.
yeah,
Like, they had a vision for where they were going, right? And if you have a consistency of vision and you're keeping that down the road, it's great. It's something like a Redbox. The Redbox just is wrapping up everything, right? Like, there was no vision for where that goes, and they fell afoul of a technology that just kind of went
Yeah.
by the way of the dinosaur, and so now they're wrapping up with bankruptcy.
yeah,
In all honesty, I think the key takeaway for CISOs reading this article is CEOs are going to move fast, and it's not going to get any slower, right? They're going to be
yeah.
constantly assessing their company's position, leaning into reinventing the company, looking at their leadership team and making sure they're the right team, and they're going to
Yeah.
want to go, go, go. So be prepared
But
for that.
this applies to the CISOs too, because that
Yeah.
landscape, the threat landscape, also
Right.
changes quite a bit.
Right.
Nobody was prepared for ransomware. Certainly not at the organization level, like hit you with a 6, 7, 8, digit ransom amount. So you kind of have to. There have been several inflection points where we're like, all right, we got this. And then the adversaries switch it up and take a different
Yeah.
approach, and we're not prepared for it. Yeah. All right. So the next article here, Global CISO Forum 2024, uniting cybersecurity leaders to shape the future of security. So kind of where I was going there. Okay, what's the next thing that we're going to miss? What do we need to be leaning towards? And I found it interesting that I think really only one of these kind of aligns with the business, and the rest are kind of
Yeah.
navel gazing almost. I would I
Right.
would describe them.
Pontificating their navel.
Yeah.
I love it. One of them that I kind of pulled out. I looked at it, and it's always good to do that lessons learned. And I see the Back to the Future, the old and relevant paradigm for CISOs
Yeah.
that people overlooked or forgot. Learn from the past, right? That one stuck out to me a little bit.
Yeah,
Yeah, for sure.
you raise an interesting point, Adrian. And like, if you think about it, so the global CISO forum, right? So we're going to get the top level of
Mhm.
security execs in a room, and we're going to have a conversation about stuff, right? And then the conversation leans back into technology,
Right.
right? Or, I mean, DEI, weaponizing cyber, hacking the human firewall. Like, we're really not talking about the things that the CISO should be talking about
Yeah.
Exactly.
strategically, like the role of the CISO in the new digital economy, right? The
It should
role
be
of
the
the CISO
conversation we just had.
as 45% of
Yeah.
CEOs decide to change
Right.
their company direction in the next decade to stay alive. Like, those should be the talking points here, not
Yeah.
like, we get caught up in it, but we don't help ourselves out.
Yeah. You know what?
Yeah.
You want to know what, Ben? Whoever's running the Global CISO Forum should look at Business Security Weekly agendas that we have for all of our shows, and build their next forum after that.
Or rename it the Global Security Director Forum of
Right. Something like that.
2024.
Exactly. That's right.
Yeah, I was looking for the get my SEC documentation done in half the time talk. It's not there.
Yeah. Yeah, like, where's think big? Like, we need to think
I know.
bigger in what we're doing.
Yep.
So, and that kind of, also related moves us to the top three budget priorities for CISOs in 2025, according to someone. But yeah, these, yeah, some interesting stuff here. What do you guys make of these?
I mean, it's yeah, the article's very high level, right? I mean, it went through and said make strategic investments to enhance security, explore emerging technologies, and divest from outdated solutions. Okay, right? I mean, that's very high level topics. It's really driving
Move your
into it. Where I
budget, look busy.
Yeah, those
yeah,
aren't really
well, I mean,
budget priorities. Those are just things to take into
those
consideration
are those are
when
high
you're
level
looking at
domains
budget
or
priorities.
topics, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, for me, this article would have been great if it sat back and it started to discuss, hey, going into my 2025 budget, I'm going to have to cut it by about 10% because the economy sucks. Where should I
Right.
prioritize my funds to make the most impact? That would have been a
yeah,
great article.
Yeah. What
yeah.
technologies can I drop to make room for things that I
Yeah, where
actually
can I
need?
consolidate? Where can I get economies of scale, right? Those type of things.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, and focus on things that actually move the bubble, and you could highlight back to the
Mhm.
business, right? So instead of just
Right.
what technologies am I dropping, what technologies are providing the least impact in a business context, and why,
Mhm.
right? And then, okay, that is an indicator, and I can go back to the business and say, hey, look, we're not getting value out of this. We can drive more value by spending, like,
Yep.
have that business level conversation around your budget priorities. So the CFO looks up and
Right.
says, wow, this guy's really thinking about this. I'm willing to hear what he has to say.
That's right. That's right. There was only one place that I said, "Oh wow, they're really thinking about this," and it was under the making strategic investment. I mean, it talked about, yep, human risk management, get it, API security, get it, been there, done there, talked about that, skills and training, got it. Oh shit, OT and IoT is important. Maybe you should invest a little bit for threat detection and oh cool, like that was the one thing I'm like, all right, good on you guys, awesome, you're actually bringing that to the table.
Well, and the one thing I found really interesting here was divesting from outdated solutions. And I think that's another inflection point we're at in cybersecurity where a lot of the best practices and assumptions, we now have evidence to show, partially thanks to ransomware, our solutions really getting tested in all kinds of different conditions, that some of the stuff really doesn't move the needle. So I,
Well,
I thought that was an interesting one, and there's a deeper discussion in there. I think about okay, which of these are companies starting to get rid of? They're just not really getting any value out of.
but some of that stuff is hampered by regulation, right? Like, I don't
Yeah,
know that we're
you
necessarily
can't you
keeping up
can't
to
get
date
rid
on
of it.
regulation and keeping it
Right.
relevant enough. I look back several years ago, and I think I maybe talked about this example before on the program. File integrity management, right? It's part of the PCI requirement to have file integrity management. And at the time, CISO came to me. I was running a significant part of the program, and he said, um, should we keep doing file integrity management? I said, look, if it was up to me, I wouldn't, but we have to from a PCI perspective. But we get literally no value from it, right? The way
Right.
in which it's
Right.
implemented and what we're doing, like, it's just wasted money. And so, what do you do when you're stuck in that situation by a legacy technology that is not actually moving the bubble, but it's required by a regulation?
And I think that's an opportunity for a vendor to come in and say, "Look, zero overhead file integrity monitoring. Here you go. Like you don't have to do anything. It's built in. We auto deploy it. You can check the box, and you waste no time on it." So
Yeah.
I think that's an opportunity, yeah, for a vendor.
Mhm.
And moving from that to, organizations that maybe don't have time to do any of it or budget to do any of it,
Yeah. Right.
small businesses.
I mean,
S
Adrian, at the end of the day, I'm so glad that this article got put in here because small businesses run 50% of our economy.
Yeah,
We stand
and
on the shoulders
and
of
they're like
small businesses.
95% of all businesses.
Right. And it's insane that, they're so at risk, but there isn't a great focus on making sure that they have the resilience that they need. They're under budget constraints. They don't have, dedicated security people most of the time.
They have to
Their
outsource almost
IT
everything.
team is probably their security team, right? Which
Mhm.
obviously we know doesn't necessarily work. We need to focus on enabling and educating small businesses, chambers of commerce, state economic development organizations. They should be really putting cybersecurity best practices and education in front of these small businesses in every state. Something needs to be done to help educate them.
Yeah. Yeah, and I wasn't. They were talking about Cyber Essentials and Cyber Essentials Plus. I'm not familiar with that. I don't know if that's some kind of small business certification or program or.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with it either, but again, I think there are organizations out there where if they really wanted to take the torch and help small businesses, they would start helping them focus on cybersecurity because again, they help drive 50% of our economy. And at the end of it, they're the ones that won't survive if they get hit by ransomware. They won't be able to afford to survive. They
It
can't
is
make
a
it through that storm.
right. It is a UK government-backed certification scheme,
Okay.
which makes sense. UK has gone pretty deep on like how much can we do for businesses, to the point to where I remember at one point they were talking about having basically like a secure web gateway for the entire nation, like for businesses that you could sign up for, and basically your traffic would get routed through their data centers and they would do some clean internet scrubbing for you, on the way in and way out. I don't know if that ever got anywhere, but yeah, they do have some interesting programs. Yeah. All right. And on to cybersecurity burnout. So kind of the flip side of this, large organizations where we've got larger security teams. Well, security teams of one, burnout
Yep.
Everybody's focused on burnout.
Absolutely.
I mean,
applies
I
just
have a
as
headache
much.
right now and want to get off this call, Adrian, but no.
It's real,
Look,
definitely
this is a
real.
huge thing in the industry that we don't talk about, and I think there's been a lot of focus. I think it started really with COVID. I mean, it was prior to that, but I think COVID was this big
Yeah,
focus on a lot of people being overworked from a cyber and IT perspective in COVID because we were trying to do a lot to get the business in a perspective where we could operate remotely, and people were putting in the time. And since then, I think we've seen a lot of constraints on budget. People not wanting to hire for replacements because the business side just hasn't been doing as well. Going into the elections, we're seeing still some uncertainty in the economy. I think people keep looking for like when's the economy kind of getting to get back on its feet and run. But until that does, the restrictions on budgets, both in the IT and the cyber side, probably elsewhere in the business, but certainly, I've talked to a lot of colleagues that we have people on our teams, and the teams are really working hard and they're burnt out. They're just because we're not operating at capacity. And we used to hear about this massive number of people that were still needed in the cyber economy, which I think we question a little bit now, like
Yeah.
what that actually means. But it still doesn't mean it's easy to hire good, talented people, right? You
Yeah.
get a lot of people that even if you're bringing in somebody, you're giving them the opportunity, it's their first time in cyber, or they're good but not great, and you're bringing them on, you're willing to train them. That training load is additional tasks on the people who are actually in your team already. So burnout's a real thing. I mean, we have to think better about how to do it. And Jason, we've talked about this before. You've got to articulate that, take time off, self
100%.
care, devote time to your family. Like if you don't do that as a leader,
Yep.
your people aren't going to do it and your burnout's going to get
yeah.
worse.
Right. Yeah, and
Well,
I mean we have to be setting the example as leaders, and we have to make sure that we're making that part of our focus, right? You know, Traditionally, organizations would look at utilization and they'd say, "Are you billable enough? Are you driving enough revenue?" I take the opposite stance. The view on utilization is, are you overworked? Do you need a break? Should you be taking PTO? How do we align utilization with how many times you've taken a vacation?
yeah,
Right? So, if your utilization is through the roof and you haven't taken a vacation in 4 months, a day
yeah,
off, you want to know what? Mr. Mrs. Director, manager, whoever you are, start have a conversation with your employee and say, listen, you've been kicking ass. Go take a couple days
Well,
off.
and to that point, Jason, you've got to do it the other way. You got to go up too, right?
Yep.
So you've
Right.
got to go to the back to the the rest of the
Yeah.
executive staff. When you're talking about justification for headcount, it's not just hey, we need another body. It's hey, look, I have statistically 95% of my employees that haven't taken more than 1 week vacation in
That's
the
right.
last 18 months. Like that's an indicator that like we just don't have the
100%.
additional headcount to keep the people we have on and the retention. So I think it's how you message that and how you show that and articulating that you're bringing that forward. That's another way to articulate to your team that this is something you take seriously and it's important.
yeah. Yeah, and I suspect the move to home, particularly for security people, analysts, people doing monitoring type roles, operations type roles. Yeah, not that moving back to the office would fix this, but when you're at home, it's a lot easier to work at night and on weekends because your work is right there,
Mhm.
and it's a lot easier to develop a drinking problem or something like that, and
Yeah.
it's 36% reported feelings of isolation, 62% reported pressure to work late at night and on weekends, and we're very mission oriented in security. A lot of people in security are
Mhm.
mission oriented, so they will have these feelings of guilt if they're not working and something's going on, there's an incident going on. They're not going to want to tap out. So
Yeah.
I think
Of
you almost
course.
have
Well,
to
it's
force
a
people to
hazard of
take
it is a
PTO and
hazard
time off.
if you haven't managed before and you haven't worked with remote people, like if you think about working in an office 8 to 5, you show up online in Teams at 4:45, and okay, I'll ping you on Teams and we'll have a discussion, right? You're working at home and your PC's just docked and it shows online at 6:30, and you
Yeah,
hit the guy up and he's walking by and he hears the ding and he's willing to take the
yeah,
call. Yeah, that's
Right.
okay. But like if you keep doing that, like you're not respecting boundaries, especially if you have
Right.
people that are not in the same time zone. You got somebody in
yeah,
Florida and somebody in California. You got to figure out how to be respectful of that, right? You can't have the California
Mhm.
guy getting up at 6 a.m. and you can't have the Florida person staying online at 8:45 in the evening. It like that will
You,
cause burnout.
you want to know one of the best things that we've instituted as an organization, where in your collaboration suite you can schedule a message. You don't have to send it right
Yeah.
away,
Yep.
yes.
right?
I've used that.
Schedule your, if it's not priority, the sky is falling, P1, things are a mess,
Mhm.
schedule your message.
Yeah,
Schedule it
you
for 8 a.m. the next day.
you can do that in Teams.
Simple.
You can do that in Slack. You can do it in
Exactly.
email too. Yeah,
Exactly. Schedule your messages.
yeah,
Simple. Then the ding doesn't happen until 8 o'clock the next day.
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean, look, on my iPhone, I actually use like sleep mode,
Yep.
right? And I've got like certain people that it will still hit me if
Yep.
it's in sleep mode. But if you call me at 7:30 in the morning, I'm sorry, it's going to voicemail. Like I'm just not
yeah,
answering,
Yep.
right? Because I like in a work from home environment, and I do a lot of hours. You've got to have that respect, and you've got to
Mhm.
encourage that for your team members, right?
That's
Like,
right.
hey, set your Outlook out of office, right? If you're on vacation, like don't take a
Yep.
call. Like I don't expect you
Exactly.
to.
Yep. And quality, do some quality assurance on it to make sure people are actually abiding by it too.
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, and one of the other stats here, 74% of cybersecurity professionals globally say that they have taken time off due to work-related mental well-being problems, with staff reporting taking an average of 3.46 sick days per year due to work-related mental well-being problems.
Right.
I That seems low to me.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, it definitely is, because I'm sure we're not logging it all, or tallying it all. But at the end of the day, as leaders, we need to realize that when our teams or ourselves even are not in a good mental state, we're not
yeah.
going to be as productive. We're going to get productivity hits, right? I mean,
I
one of the
remember,
stats in here was like they're projecting six, what is it, 626 million lost in productivity annually
yeah.
because of this. I mean, we're not going to have our A game. We want our employees to have our A game, right? Have their A
I
game. So
remember 20 years ago telling my boss that I'm taking a mental health day.
mhm,
Like
yep.
I
He
remember
looked at you
uttering those
cross-eyed
words.
20 years ago.
I mean, he was a pretty young guy too. Like we were fairly close in age. I think he was 5 years older, and like he got this at that point.
Yeah,
Like it's this isn't that new. That yeah, the brain just can't handle going back to work right after a week and a half of ransomware recovery.
right.
All right. And going into the last one here, I think this is a really interesting one. Particularly with elections coming up, there's a lot of leadership conversations going on, and leading by serving. And I think we've all had the managers that seen the folks who don't quite get that, and this is very seems very comprehensive in kind of defining exactly what that means.
Yeah, and I mean,
and how
Ben,
to go about it.
servant leadership has been something on my radar for
Yeah,
quite a while,
yeah,
right, Ben? We've talked about this many,
That's
many
your thing.
times, and it's taking that service oriented mentality, whether it's how you perform your work or how you lead your people or how you operate day to day within your organization. I, I think it's a mentality in a structure we all need to have because it's having that positive impact on everything you do. I mean, it outlines it here. Listen, be a mentor, have integrity, have humility, have gratitude, and have the right attitude. What's wrong with that? Right?
So
Where can someone poke holes in that?
I'll play devil's advocate. I'll throw the stone into the pond.
Do it.
Um, Look, so I think in the if you look at the graphic on this,
Mhm.
it's a good graphic to explain where I challenge this a bit, right? So from a leader to employees, I completely agree with you, right? Like
Yep.
transforming yourself into that and understanding like look, not everybody's wired that way. People have
Sure.
different ways that they're wired in relationships, and so you may have there's different business schools on this, right, with the four buckets and where you fit or the color scheme that you are and how you align for communication. But this is a great graphic to look and say, okay, when you're thinking about employees, you want to have somewhat of a servant leadership mentality, and that's going to vary by person. Where I struggle with this, I think people take this and then they expand this across the line. Have you read the book A Seat at the Table?
I have not. No.
no,
So I would recommend. So it was written from the perspective of a CIO, and it's generally
Yep.
CIO-ish. There's a little bit of security in there, but the concept is, and this is where it like pivoted me on the servant leadership side. He said, IT leaders have typically approached the business as a servant leader. They wanted to offer service, right? But if you're asking for a seat at the table and you're coming and saying, "How can I help you, sir?" You're viewed as the waiter, right? You're not viewed as someone sitting down to have dinner. And so there's a little bit of dichotomy in that. And again, it's a long discussion for where we are here, but
Mm.
the book had a really interesting take on that of making sure that while you're focusing on servant leadership and you do want to serve the business to an extent, you're not doing it from a position that you're not actually elevating yourself to have
Yeah.
that seat at the table, being seen as a leader to the rest of the leaders in the org. So again,
And
that's
Ben,
my contrarian
this is where I
viewpoint.
would love to have a sit down with the author of that because there's two words in this. It's called servant leadership, not servitude. So
Yeah,
leadership is the other 50% of what this is, right? So you're leading in service of an organization, in service of your team. You're leading in service of your clients. And to be honest with you, the visual that's there, the one thing I would put up at the top of employees is client, right? Because
yeah,
employees are serving the customers, right? So it would be leader, management,
yeah.
employees, customer.
yeah.
That should be at the top of that if you're in
And
business.
Jason, I don't disagree with you. Mark Schwartz, by the way, author of that book,
Yep.
and I'll send you a link. Uh, I don't disagree with you. I'm saying that like when you say servant leadership, I think how
Mhm.
it's interpreted in the application is the important part,
Oh,
right?
sure.
And if you
Agreed.
take it to that wrong side, which I think that's again, I do believe it is like I didn't think about it in that context, but from an IT and security side, when we're struggling and we're like, well, if I just try to offer up more, right? Um,
Mhm.
but it's definitely it's a hierarchical and a power structure and
Yep.
it's the way in which that alignment makes sense. And a peer to peer, you have to operate as a peer, right? You want to
Exactly.
help. Like if you had a
Yep.
friend and they needed help with something, you say, "How can I help?" But you don't want to
Sure.
be abused, right?
Right. A
And
hundred
I
percent.
think with your kids, yeah, it's like how can it's a different relationship with children, right? Like the way you're trying to bring them along and educate them
Mhm.
and train them,
Yeah,
but you don't want to be overbearing and force them to do stuff. So
Yeah.
it's really
yeah.
understanding the place that you sit in the relationship that you're having and making sure that you're applying everything you have to make sure that that connection and relationship is the most fruitful possible.
And
Agreed.
I
Agreed.
think if we had
100%.
more time, examples would really help here. Because one example that I love is an environment where you can have a frank conversation with your boss about how much money you're making and whether or not you're thinking
Yeah.
of leaving and going somewhere else. And
Yep.
places where you could never imagine having that kind of conversation with your boss. Like very different approaches to leadership.
Well, just on that, like I saw something the other night and it was really interesting. It was about people quitting jobs in Japan, and so it apparently a much different dynamic there, to the point where they will hire, like an employee will hire somebody to go in and quit for them, or like people just leave a note on the desk that say I quit, because like the manager will browbeat you into like, why are you leaving? How much money are you making? Where are you going? And then potentially even sabotage you in that new job by, and so yeah, you've got to have the right relationship, right? And those examples are really helpful to help put people's mind in a framework. Again, why I referenced that book is because I had never thought about it in that context of the perception the way you could be thought of. So, this is a topic that's almost a whole say easy, do hard, or long form thing.
I was just thinking the same thing, Ben. I love it. That would be a great segment, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
So I just dropped how I quit one particularly bad job in the Slack.
I love it.
Is that a cake?
That's a cake. It's a German chocolate cake.
I was just going to say German chocolate. That's what it looks like. Like, at least the guy got a good cake.
Yeah, it was a very good cake.
You didn't buy him the vanilla sheet cake from Walmart. Yeah, you got
No. The ladies at Publix were just absolutely thrilled with the order when I gave it to them.
Nice.
All right. And with that, thank you so much, Jason and Ben, for joining me today. It's been a lot of fun. I always have fun on this show. I love coming over here.
We love having you, Adrian.
Yeah, great conversation, Adrian. Thank you.
All right. Big thanks to everyone watching or listening to this week's episode of Business Security Weekly.